Hey everybody. So in this video I'm going to talk about complete fingering and planning of musical details and how it greatly improves your learning speed, the quality of your playing ultimately, the level of musical detail you can go to, and many other things besides. So I think we'll start with fingering first. So my views are, I guess, considered pretty weird or odd by most professional pianists. I have the unpopular opinion of, the fact that writing literally every single fingering, often even if it's very redundant or obvious, that this is a helpful thing. And I think the thinking goes that, it's very time consuming to write out every single fingering. It's not necessary. If it just repeats, why would you write it again? It interferes with your sight reading because, if you have all the fingering written, and you encounter a new piece of music with no fingering on it, you won't know what to do. I really haven't found any of these alleged weaknesses that I've just mentioned to be the case. I think for every tool and process and strategy, said tool or process or strategy is only as good as its user. So, we just do whatever works. And what I found is literally writing all the fingering, it gives us unique advantages, especially when combined with my logical methods of problem solving. Because if you've watched any of my previous videos, a lot of the time the work goes into super specific granular detail, right? We're practicing like a very specific section of a given measure. We're adding tiny little fragments in reverse. We're jumping around to different places and so on. And really what complete fingering does is it gives you the ability to start literally from anywhere in the music with zero hesitation, with zero delay. And when I say zero, I mean like when I look at a random spot on a given page, I don't have to think to myself for even 1 second or 7/10 of a second, I see, that's what it is. I just know it immediately at a glance. And it's, separate or both hands, mentally or physically, literally from any spot in the measure. We know it instantaneously. And this is an enormous time saver in the long run. Like, even though it takes time to write out all of the fingering, I still think the time that's saved in the end, if you want to learn to a certain level of detail, if you want to keep your coordinations consistent, which is, that's really one of the biggest effects of always playing with the same finger on that given note, it's still will save you tons of time. There is an exception. There are pianists of such a caliber. I've watched some of their videos. Some of the insane stories you may hear about somebody that's memorized, for instance, the complete Beethoven sonatas in a year. I forget who that pianist was, but there are geniuses seemingly that are beyond all the methodologies that I'm describing. But unless you're of that order of genius or ability, I think this is mostly going to apply because we'll work on pieces for a long time. So this is really one of the prime examples here. This is my edition of the Chopin Etudes. I learned to memorize the complete etudes. In other words, this entire book, essentially in the latter 6 months of 2020, although I'd done some beforehand. Now, I'm not going to pretend I can play them in concert, but at least I learned them for myself and played them all from beginning to end. Now I'm coming back to them again. And this is actually my second copy because my first copy, literally the binding just this is already pretty bad because I've opened it so many times, but it really just completely fell apart, and there were many pages that, kind of were missing or difficult to find. So I got this, and, you can see opus 10 number 1 here. I posted this on my Instagram before, but you can see that literally every fingering of every single page is written in this book here. So, so I really did take the time to do this, and like I said earlier, because of that, if we want to start from over here, right hand alone, over there on that specific chord, on that one with the 5-1, there's no delay whatsoever. And if we're playing mentally also, like because we're so used to starting physically from so many different places, it really, really helps our conception and awareness. So not all of my students go to write everything, and also obviously the piece that they're trying to learn or memorize is not going to be as massive as this. But I highly recommend just, not losing time through mixing logistical processes. As in, I don't really recommend, writing out the fingering for one measure or one section of a measure and then practicing it, in some specific way using strategy and then writing the fingering for the next measure. I honestly just, I think this is 115 pages. I actually just wrote the fingering for like all 115 pages. I think over the course of, I want to say like a few days or a little bit more. And that was like my practice time. Like I timed the practice as well. And I got a really good global view because you have to try out little sections in order to figure out the fingerings. And I would recommend trying to find the fingering separate hands. Even for myself, I think it's ideal to do that. And then you can try both hands to see if there's any kind of little discrepancies. Now, the way that I teach fingering, of course, you can acquire knowledge through scales and arpeggios. You can acquire knowledge through studying very beginner pieces and then progressing gradually upward from there. But honestly, I largely teach fingering in two ways, apart from like the traditional. Either I just write all of the fingering for a given piece or section because the student's a total beginner or doesn't have much experience. Then they can ask me like, oh, why did you choose that? Why didn't you choose this? What's your rationale for that? And I'm teaching them fingering principles through just organic conversation. Because sometimes people want to know what they are beforehand. Like, oh, how do I know which fingering to choose? Best just to use real life examples. And over time, we'll start to fill in, many different blanks and gaps. Alternatively, the student can write the fingering. If they don't want to have bad habits or waste time, then, they could write the fingering for a section that they won't practice yet. As in, they will, let's say that they can play the first 3 lines and they're actually practicing that. Maybe they can write the fingering for the 4th line or the 4th and 5th lines and then bring that in, or they're doing it during the session. And I will critique the fingering, let them know what works, what doesn't, and why, what fingering I would choose. We have a discussion about it. And people acquire knowledge about fingering very quickly through these means, through these real life examples, through real pieces that they're working on. In my experience, it's way, way faster than the traditional means of progressing, easy piece to slightly more difficult piece and so on, because the level of example or the level of difficulty in the examples they're presenting is just much more sophisticated since we're working on a goal piece or a dream piece of theirs right away. So what I'm realizing in the moment, right, this video is also more or less completely unplanned. I think my idea of how long it takes to explain something it usually ends up being twice as long as my original estimate. So probably I'll just wrap it up here, have a relatively shorter video. I'm going to continue this conversation maybe in a little series here. Sometimes I might share just whatever random topic I feel like, but I think this can definitely continue. But yeah, I would just say write out all the fingering. As for why I do things when they're redundant, the time it takes for me to think, should I write this because there's a repeat here? I might as well just write it. And you become fast at everything as a result of doing this. Like I'm fast at deciding fingering. I'm fast at changing fingering on the fly if needed. I'm even fast at the physical act of writing because I've written so many of them. Like when I'm writing fingerings for students, sometimes I need to think a bit, but other times I'll just write it out even while we're speaking or while I'm helping somebody else maybe, if it's within one of my strategic teams. So yeah, hope some of those ideas are helpful or surprising. Welcome questions about it. And please like and subscribe if you found this helpful or you would like to hear answers to more questions like these. And yeah, more thoughts about probably fingering and hopefully the complete planning of musical details and other considerations next time. Thanks.